Hey, everybody, welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name is Henry Bingaman. When I was 18 years old, I made the romantic and somewhat reckless decision to major in fiction writing. Now, in college, I learned a lot about narrative and story and point of view and plot lines and the hero's journey. But once I graduated, I learned that there's not a big market of people out there hoping to hire a 22-year-old fiction writing major. So I switched to copywriting, and I thought it would be easy because I had all these narrative tools and I knew how to tell a dramatic big story. And of course, that's what I heard copywriting was. And I learned very quickly that you could fall on your face trying to tell the big fiction narrative in copywriting stories. So I had to learn an entirely different type of storytelling. And once I did, I went on to sell, well over $300 million worth of goods and services online. But it took some time to adjust. Now, I could teach you some of my tricks, but I thought I'd bring on someone who has a whole lot more experience in copywriting and storytelling than I do. And that is Mr. David Garfinkel. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Henry.
So you are known as the world's greatest copywriting coach. You have the Copywriters podcast, which you've been running since 2017, I think, right? It's been a while.
That's right. Yeah.
And so you've been in this for 40 some years in the copywriting game?
Now 30. I've been in the writing game for a little, 50 years actually. But the first 20, yeah, I'm pretty old. But the first 20 years of it were as a journalist. And no, actually, you may be right. Now, I don't know. There's 10 years missing there somewhere. But I started out as a journalist, and boy, that didn't work for me. Kind of like you, right? I mean, I thought I was going to do one kind of writing and not exactly a good fit. So about 10 years working as a journalist, almost 10 years hardly working, and it was hardly working. And and then yeah, I discovered copywriting about 30 years ago. And man, once I found out what it was, learned how to do it, I didn't want. I would say I didn't want to do anything else, but I'd been fascinated. What I've been doing for 40 years was studying story, the type you studied in college. Essentially, story that shows up on a page, on a screen, on a stage, fiction, plays, movies, that kind of storytelling. Those big, long, involved hero's
Yeah.
journeys. Wonderful, nutritional stuff for our brains and our souls, but doesn't sell too well, does it?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, it's funny that you would think it translates over better. It seems like writing is writing and storytelling is storytelling, right? It's all about keeping attention, keeping people's eyes glued to the page, moving them on to the next sentence, the next sentence. But it's very different when you're trying to make them wonder what happens than when you're trying to make them like buy something from you. It's just a very different type. You don't have the same attention span, I think, is one of the big differences.
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of evolutionary biology, psychology, um, anthropology, and if you go way, way back in time, the original storytellers may have been shamans, may have been the village elder. They were people who would pass wisdom down on to the next generations through these long, involved stories, which our DNA apparently has programmed us to remember and to get very engaged in when we hear. I don't know if they had traveling salesmen back in the day, but they had a different rhythm. They basically needed to tell you how what they had to offer was better, different, going to make your life better, less expensive to buy than not to buy. And of course, as copywriters, we're more in the tradition of that traveling salesman of caveman
Yeah.
days than we are of the storyteller. Although there are some crossovers, but it's funny because what you said right out of the chute was so important. The market is very small. I did some research, and I don't know, 50,000 or 500,000, some ungodly number of screenplays was registered with the Writers Guild in a recent year. And out of the 50,000, maybe 200 movies were made.
Right.
I mean, what are those odds? That's less than 1%, right? Now, not everyone's going to make it as a copywriter, and you and I both know as copywriters that not every promotion is going to work, but our odds are much better.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I remember looking at the statistics on new books when they're published, and it's something like only 15% of books that are actually published by a publisher earn back their royalty. So even, which means you don't get the next contract, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of one-off authors. Even if you make it that holy grail, I got published in that giant narrative, it's a hard market out there to make it work. Now, I think self-publishing is actually bringing a lot more good fiction online than the old traditional model used to. But even then, like, I don't know, it's a hard market out there, and you just have a much better odds learning a new type of storytelling and going copy or marketing or freelancing in that realm.
Well, sure. I mean, on last week, I had a very bright woman who's been studying like the people I would suggest anyone study. And she has found a way to train dogs after like 19 years and hundreds of tens of thousands of dollars of investment. She's cut out all of the ways that don't work. And she has a local business, in the Southwest. And she needed to write a letter. And it was pretty good for someone who wasn't a copywriter. And, I critiqued it and we trimmed the fat and rearranged things and took out the 117 word headline and that kind of stuff. And there are millions of people like that. There are what,
Mhm.
30 million, 40 million solopreneurs? No, they're not all as smart or as successful as her. But I mean, there are how many movie studios, how many streaming services, right? I mean, the fact is, it's a competitive world, but there are so many opportunities, especially so, there are real big money niches in direct response copywriting. There's financial, there's, alternative health, and I guess there's business opportunity or internet marketing stuff. But there are hundreds of other businesses that frankly are a lot easier to be successful in because the customers haven't seen the same headline or the same appeal or the same offer 100 times before.
Yeah, and I mean, you get into some of those smaller niches, and you're not going up against me. And if you're in relationships, you're not going up against Chris Haddad, because who wants to try and compete with that? If you're
I
in
don't.
self-defense, you're not going up against the John Carltons and the Roy Furs. Like, there's nobody that your competition is much less, and people are not going to have seen the same letter over and over. So, I mean, in a Gene Schwartz sense, the level of awareness is much lower.
Yes, very, very, very good point. Yeah. So, as far as these stories, I always wanted to write a book about stories. I'd taken, Robert McKee's seminar. I'd
Mhm.
been outside and smoked with him, during a break. Found out we went to the same. I mean, I took a lot of seminars. I took seminar. I studied with a players workshop in Second City. I took a playwriting class in New York. This is over the course of that's the 40 years. And I thought I had to write a book about story. And you know, my first thought was, I don't have anything new to say. It's all been said. And my second thought, and these thoughts did not occur without a lot of pain and agony and time span between them. But the second thought was, they're bullshitting us. All these people who are saying you need a hero's journey story in business. And I don't know if you've seen Robert McKee's book about, storytelling in business, but he says any kind of selling is fraud and deceit. I mean, this is a guy who comes from a business where a book was written. Hello, he lied. I mean, don't talk to me about fraud and deceit. So yeah, a very anti-capitalistic, anti-sales message. But most of them aren't anti-business, but they're all saying the same thing. And both in copy and in sales, people tell stories that are nothing like the hero's journey, and those stories work, and other people want to hear those stories, and those people who hear the stories buy. And I realized there was no book on anything like that, and I was going to have to create the architecture. I was going to have to discover what the structure in which all the stories that you and I use every day as copywriters, my clients use all the time as copywriters, where they fit. And that part was hard and worth it. I mean, I've gotten lots of reviews on Amazon. Oh, I should tell people what the book is called. It's called The Persuasion Story Code. All right. And, I've gotten lots of people who said that they'd studied storytelling for years. They spent thousands of dollars on it, and this book solved the problem they've been trying to solve all along. So it was worth it. It was harder to do than I expected. But
I read the book. I bought it, I don't know, couple months ago, and I read it, and then I contacted our mutual friend Joshua Lee Henry, and I was like, I gotta talk to him. I gotta get Garfinkel on because I have my whole seven stories methodology that I've taught through, and when I mentor people in the Agora divisions and other places I've worked, and I have a much looser categorization of stories. So I have like a paradigm shift. I have the shocking discovery, a hero's journey, like the hero's backstory. And then I have what I call in the middle escalations. And escalations can be 40 different kinds of stories. And what you did in this book that was so brilliant is you actually went in and narrowed down a lot of them. I mean, a lot of them are different parts of, but uh, different parts that I just call escalations that are actually nine or 10 different types of stories. And you outline them all in the book brilliantly. So I was like, I have to talk to him. He did it better than I did.
Thank you. Yeah, what you're doing sounds really good. And one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to write this for copywriters and for business owners and for salespeople. I mean, maybe that's a mistake but it doesn't seem to have hurt, But I believe there's a whole world out there that needs to know how to use stories to sell. And there are other books like there's what's his name, Donald Demoine, I think. I can't remember what the book's called, and he talks about using NLP techniques in stories. And Kenrick Cleveland has some stuff. I mean, there are people who have other things besides the hero's journey, but yeah, I wanted to give people. I don't think this is the end all and be all. I mean, some of the things you're talking about, I realized I didn't exactly cover. And for copywriting, for big ticket, big stage copywriting, that's what you did is very valuable. Just based on your brief description of it. But I wanted to have you know a general use manual and for this kind of stuff that anybody could use. Now, it's interesting. As copywriters, as writers, we tend to forget how hard it is for most people to string two sentences together where the second sentence follows the first one. I mean, I guess if we were in Silicon Valley, we would say, yeah, well, as coders, we forget how hard it is for one person to put one module after another one where there's but it's what we do technically. And I spoke to a mastermind where no one was a writer. They were all business people. They were all pretty successful, smart, professional people, but not writers. And there was this one guy in there. He was an inventor. Name was Noah Barron, and he'd invented a very cool thing for beer called the tilt hydrometer. And it sounds very technical, but if you're a home brewer of beer, you put this thing in, seal it shut, and it tells you what the fermentation level is. When it reaches a certain point, then I don't know, you go to the next phase. I guess you stop the fermentation with something. And nothing like that had existed. And he worked and worked and worked to put a story together. I didn't work with him, but the person heading the mastermind did. And then he went, this is really weird. He knows another person named Noah Barron, same name, who's a filmmaker in LA. And Noah Barron and a cinematographer worked with him, and they put together this 2-minute video. It's just awesome. It's based on one of the inventor's origin story. Technically, in the book, I call it, I couldn't find what I was looking for, so I invented it myself, origin story. But I've shortened that to inventor's origin story. And it was really good. I mean, the production value and the content was good enough for national TV, if he ever wanted to put that on there. He has a really successful business. He sold tens of thousands of these things, but he never had a story. That's how he came up with it. And in a way, he's the kind of person I wrote this for, because copywriters, they'll have they'll figure stuff out, they'll swipe, and they have ways of putting stories together. There's still a lot of frustrated copywriters out there when it comes to storytelling, I've found out. But this guy, he had nowhere to go, no clue. And, the hero's journey to him was like, yeah, that's what I see when I watch a movie. What does that have to do with me? You know?
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot more people than just marketers, writers, inventors, business people that need stories. It's one of the problems that a lot of people have is they're boring. They don't know how to just have a like tell a story and get people to engage with them. And so it actually causes a lot of problems in all areas of their life, like relationships, family, networking, business. Like being able to tell a good story is kind of critical to anybody that if you have a message to spread. I know I have a lot of libertarians watching. I have a lot of Bitcoiners watching. If you can't tell the story of Bitcoin, you're losing, right? If you believe that this is the future of money, but you can't tell that story convincingly, but you can tell the math. I mean, you need to combine both things. So that's why I really like the book because it gives little frameworks and there's like checklists. There's like 4-step processes for how to tell each story in it. So I want to go through a couple of the stories that I think or story frameworks that I think are incredibly important. And the one that everybody needs in some way is the origin story. Can you kind of just give an overview of
Sure.
what an origin story is?
Yeah. An origin story it's a history of how a person's current status or skill came into being or a product came into being. I actually I didn't know you were going to ask me this, but I have one that I can share with you. I can even, if you want to let me share the screen, people can, follow the bouncing ball. They can follow along. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So this is that inventor's origin story, and I'll share with everybody right now the 4 steps, and then I'll actually share a story. Guess what the story's about?
The inventor's origin story. What is the story about?
The invention of the persuasion story code.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So when do you use a story like this? When you've come up with an invention because of a personal need that couldn't be satisfied with anything that was available at the time. I mean, if you think about Noah Baron, all these home brewers couldn't. It was very awkward, and even a sanitary issue about contaminating
Mhm.
the brew. And so he came up with something. And okay, so here are 4 simple questions. What was the worst part of the way things were regarding the problem you eventually set out to solve? What happened that made you decide to create something new? What were the highlights of your invention or creation process? And what did you end up with? And what are its most important benefits? Now, just to explain the process, and most writers know this, you might have to write out a lot more than you eventually use, and you might have to tighten it and make transitions smooth and so forth. But this is a framework. If you start out with what was the worst and what you end up with, and you hit these points in the middle, what happened and what were the highlights, boom, you're there. So here's the story. I had been studying the craft of story for over 40 years. At the same time, I was a working professional copywriter and copy coach for more than 30 years. One thing really stuck in my craw. Why were all the stories the so-called gurus recommending nothing like the ones people actually use in copy or in sales or anywhere in real life outside of a novel, a movie, a TV show, or a video game? Frankly, I was getting pissed off to hear the quote unquote experts insisting that, and there are people who say this, every story in business has to be a hero's journey. So I decided to write a book. It wasn't easy. I completely rewrote one chapter 3 times. Writing the whole book took twice as long as I planned. The editing and proofreading were much harder than I thought. But what I came up with was fresh, unique, and useful. Many readers told me it was the best book on the use of persuasion and storytelling they'd ever seen. It's called the Persuasion Story Code. So there you go. I will
Bravo.
thank you.
So that's a perfect example of what I had to make it myself, right? It wasn't there and I had to invent it. But there are different kinds of origin stories. So I guess like I guess the beginning when I opened up with I kind of told an origin story. I went to
You
college
did.
for this, and in my sales letter for the freelancing course, I have a different type of origin story. It's I think the sales letter starts out, I knew what I was about to do was illegal, but I just didn't care. It
That's What a hook.
It
I
was
love
all
it.
about, I took out the last dollar bill I had to my name, and I wrote my last dollar, and I dated it 12/9/2009, and I was vowed to never spend it. And I was going to make this freelancing thing work no matter what. So that's a different type of origin story.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have just one origin story. I think your origin story needs, everybody has different origins, right? There's different levels of your life and career that have an origin. So I think it's worth it to have a collection of origin stories for your life, for your products, for different things.
I agree. I like to think of an origin story as a case study through time of how something came to be. And yeah, I mean, now you as a person with a degree in fiction writing, and me as a longtime outside of college student of stories, there are a lot of techniques that Hollywood has figured out, or fiction writers have figured out, or you know, Homer and Aeschylus figured out, or whatever, however you want to look at it, that we can use. But we're doing short form, and you know, one thing it's important to understand, and it sort of goes back to the caveman analogy. In most hero's journey or long form fiction stories, there are life lessons that are imparted. There's wisdom, and you learn it through inference. You learn it by coming to a conclusion about something someone did or said. And there's other teaching, but there's great emotional involvement. In our stories, yeah, you want the engagement of the reader, but we're not trying to teach life lessons. We're trying to sell something.
Right.
Now what we're selling may teach life lessons. The transformation the person may go through with our product may teach life lessons, but that's not what we're doing in this story. And, for someone who has all the grandiosity of a writer, and writers do, you kind of got to think you're something if you got a story to tell the world. It's a little humbling in a way. You're just basically a saleswoman.
I don't know. It's not just a salesperson, or there's. I feel like you can do some good with these storytelling skills, especially if you like. This is why I love storytelling, because it's not just about selling. It can be used for selling. It can be used for persuasion, but there's all types of persuasion that you want to do in your life. You could tell your kids a story about why they should eat their broccoli, right? You're going to grow up big and strong, a future pacing story. You could tell,
Right.
you could tell your parents a story about why you had to put them in the nursing home. I mean, there's all different kinds of ways. Don't worry, mom, dad, I'm not doing that. You're fine. But there's all kinds of different ways to use story. One of the things that you use story for is actually relating to people. What you have in your
Mhm.
book is stories about what your prospect is experiencing, is what you call it, right? So what are the benefits of those types of stories? And can you give us maybe an example?
Sure. I mean, those stories are ways of demonstrating empathy without, the sort of ham-fisted approach of I feel you, I feel your pain, right? I mean, if you have a friend that just got treated really badly by the IRS, and you can say, God, and this is truth. I know what that's like. I remember when one day I got this funny letter, pink letter that said my bank accounts had been frozen and there was a lien on this and that. It really sucks. And it took me a while to realize there was nothing wrong with me. This is just what they do to people. You know, that's showing empathy. It's not telling the person, hey, don't worry about it. We'll get you an accountant. I know a sharp guy who can get you out of it. That's very different approach. That's like the fix it approach to which, men are accused of doing too quickly in relationships. But just telling a person that you understand how they feel through a story rather than just, as they would say, on the nose, um, saying those words, it can have a profound healing effect for another person. It can help them relieve tension. Most of all, it makes them feel like they're not so alone.
Yeah, the best sales letter I ever wrote, that did $140 million or something over 7 years for a weight loss product for women, and it was done by Jay Tita, who's this bald linebacker, like buff dude. So you have this man trying to sell weight loss programs to women going through menopause is the main audience. The story that I think really locked it in is he talks about this one client he had as a personal trainer, and he was pushing her as hard as he possibly could, and she just couldn't lose weight. And one day she just broke down crying and screamed at him like, why are you treating me like a man? I'm not. And then he realized that women and men are different and they need to be treated differently. So it's that whole like, he pushed it all the way through to the breakthrough of like, but that I think the women felt that woman's pain. I told the story a little better in the sales letter, but it's relating to people can be such a powerful thing of getting them on your side.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure when women, I can see why that letter did so well. I mean, I don't know of anyone else who's done 100 and I did a sales letter did 40 million, but not 140 million. That's the biggest I've ever heard. And I can see why too. I mean, wow. Yeah, because it's tricky, you know. I mean, women experience certain things differently. They want to be treated as equal, but as women. And it seems like you captured it so well with that story.
Well, the other thing, I couldn't have done it that well. I had to hire my friend Marcel Allison to come on and coach me through that letter
Oh,
because
Marcella, she's
yeah,
great.
I was I think 32 or something at the time trying to talk to menopausal women, and I interviewed a lot of them, and they tell you some hilarious stories. Menopausal women will just tell you anything. I don't know how appropriate some of the stories are to get into, but they'll tell you their symptoms, and they're not great. The hot flashes, the I don't even want to get into it, but
Okay.
I mean, having somebody that I could trust to go like tell me that I was being stupid. Like I kept saying that you'll get that ideal, ideal body that you want, hourglass body that you want. And Marcel was like, dude, menopausal women don't think they're going to get an hourglass body. Like you're disconnecting from them by saying that. Like you're showing you don't understand them. So she had me change it to the ideal body, and I think that probably saved a lot of sales that I would have lost by not understanding that person. So you have to get into people's minds, and if you're a copywriter, hire somebody to help you with that. If you're not the prospect, hire somebody that's good at selling that can relate to your prospect.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's a skill you can develop to a degree, and I think it's important for writing stories. It's also a good idea when there's a lot of money on the line and a lot of the stakes are high in other ways, to get someone who can help you with it. One thing I realized, guess it's plain and obvious, but I realized is that novelists are extraordinarily good at this. A really good novelist has to get not only into the hero's mind, but into the villain's mind, the antagonist's mind, and even into the mind of, secondary people, so that those people can make believable, appropriate for who they are, actions and statements. And this is kind of it's not a right-left divide, but it's a right brain, left brain divide in our society. I mean, one of the things that's come up with work on the promotion I've been doing, the social media posts I've been doing on my book about stories, is the reminder that there is a group of people in business who think stories are just a waste of time. And yeah, it would be a waste of time to tell a 2-hour story to try and, close a sale for, some cartons of toners, maybe, right? But have you ever heard of Ben Feldman?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
Well, he's a real old school guy. He's not with us anymore, but he was considered the world's best life insurance salesman.
Okay.
And when he was interviewed by the New York Times some years ago, and the reporter asked him, well, like, how do you sell life insurance? That seems like it'd be so hard to do. And he just said, well, I was with a client the other day, and I told him, I was downtown in a very high office tower with one of my clients, and we were looking out the window from this skyscraper, and there were these men in a graveyard, and they were shoveling earth. And I said, they're not practicing. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's what, like a 30-second story. But, for someone who is having a hard time, you know, facing the possibility or the inevitability of their own death, which is kind of necessary most of the time when you're going to buy life insurance, that was a real good shortcut way to get them there.
Yeah, because nobody wants to think about their own death. You can't say, "Hey, you're going to die soon," right?
Right.
You have to come at it in a story. That's the nice thing about stories is they sneak messages in. I don't mean in a immoral way. I mean it's a better way. The brain understands a story better than a direct approach in a lot of different contexts.
That's a really good way to put it. Yes, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, never heard it that way, but yes, it does. But I can't remember who said it. I think it was a very famous quotable name, but they said, we don't think in words, we don't think in numbers, we think in stories, and we do. It might be the guy who wrote *Sapiens*.
Y'all, or I know you're all. Yeah, I know who you're
I
talking
can't
about.
say his name, but
Yeah,
I like his book. Yeah,
yeah. He's *Sapiens* was an interesting book. His work with the WEF has me freaked out a little bit, but
yeah.
there's a really important chapter in your book titled "Truth or Consequences," right? And
Mm,
one of the really, I mean, I've never heard it put this way either, and I really like it. There's a difference between truth and believability. So can you talk about that because it's a really important distinction?
sure. So people kind of believe what's within the realm of their own belief system or in the realm of things that they've heard before. So you might you might have a financial guru that has gotten 60% returns every year. No one's going to believe that, even if it's true. So you've got to find a way to put it in a frame or in a story that fits in with what they could believe is true. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, because I can't tell you. I just gave myself an impossible challenge. I don't know what to do with that 60% a year. But I mean, the thing is, it, it takes a lot of experience, a lot of conversation back and forth, successes and failed attempts to really get an intuitive sense of what people will believe and what they won't believe. Um, but um, people are always willing to believe something bad, the conspiracy theories, bad acts on the part of one person, um, disasters, impending disasters. Outside of things like the realm of business opportunity, people aren't really willing to believe, although sometimes, with a skillful salesman, uh, a skillful ill-intentioned salesman, they can get them to believe some scams. If you look
Huh.
at some of the companies the FTC's been bringing down, they have telemarketers who can just figure out what a person's credit card limit is and take all of it.
Oh yeah, it's really ugly out there in some cases. There's so many layers though to truth versus believability because there's sometimes where you can't tell the truth in a sales letter because legal won't let you. And
Mhm.
there's some cases where you can make a very believable claim that's not true. And like a lot of people, like I'm actually kind of glad that Agora went through the pounding it did from the FTC. It was getting ugly in there where you had to keep upping the claim, and they were making. There's very good copywriters in the Agora universe, like some of the best in the
Oh
world,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
they were making it sound possible to get 1,000,000% returns a year. And you're like, no, you can't do it. Like it's maybe some crypto scam at the top of the pyramid, you could have done it. But it's just the claims were like, and they would sneak it through legal with, well, if you invested in all of our winners and avoided all of the losers and reinvested all of your gains in the next big winner, you would have made, turned $1,000 into 2 million. You're like,
Right.
okay, the
Yeah.
impossible criteria, sure, technically true, but not honest. And I think that's another like true versus honesty. Truth versus honesty is another distinction. I don't know. There's just I think about this the morals around copywriting all the time. It's like you start every podcast with your copy is powerful. Get a lawyer to look at this.
Right.
Um, but there is a lot to think about with the morals of selling. So I guess just do you have general thoughts on where you draw the lines? Because there's also an element of entertainment that you have to do in sales letters. Like I call it misdirection in some of mine, where I present three different options and keep the reader guessing to make them keep watching the sales letter. So I don't know. How do you think about ethics in copywriting, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the fundamental question is manipulation. And do we have to manipulate, and is manipulation good or bad? And I think because of what you said, which I'm not blaming you with it, I think you just explained it better than I've heard it otherwise. Sometimes the brain understands things through stories that it can't understand through direct statement. Sometimes we do need to manipulate in order even to get people in touch with what they want and willing to go for what they want. So where does it become ethical and where does it become unethical? And it's always a judgment call, right? But I mean, it's always subject to debate. But the way I look at it is if you are setting it up so that the person who gets this is doing it for what you truly believe and what they truly believe is their benefit, then it's ethical. If you're doing it to their detriment, but to your benefit, then it's unethical. And, each case you can split hairs and break it down because there's always more to that. That's how I look at it, because there's no way you're going to convince somebody using, a purely logical argument that doesn't involve feelings, senses, emotions, and, some of the other more subjective aspects of communication. It's never happened and it never will.
Yeah, also you don't want to remove emotion from the decision-making process. You don't want to turn people into robots, right? There's emotion it's a human experience. You can't remove it. So I don't know. I have a line that I recently drew. I kind of retired from copywriting for a couple of years. I just took on a new financial project that's launching next week, actually, for Banyan Hill.
Oh,
But I got a lot of offers from a bunch of different people, and a couple of the offers were crypto focused. And having studied crypto now, and I'm a Bitcoin maxi, you could say, having studied crypto, most of it's pyramid schemes. And even though some of their gurus really believe what they're selling, I ethically can't get over the hurdle to promote something that I think is unethical. But I would happily sell an option service, even though I don't trade options. There's nothing unethical about the systematic approach that these guys are going through. So I don't know. I think you have to draw the line within yourself too. And I think it's important to have ethics in your own life when you're doing these things. There's not hard lines out there. But it's something that I want people to just think about, and actually know where you're going to draw the line. So you're not tempted when you get that, offer to write a promo for something that is too sketchy, that you just take the money. So I don't know. I just encourage people to think about these things ahead of time.
yeah. And I love the example you just gave because, a pyramid scheme is basically going to screw everybody but the person at the top.
Yeah.
But then options, that has to do with your risk tolerance and your speed and your skill.
Right.
That's different.
Yeah.
So if you're properly equipped and if you put in the effort, you can win.
Yes.
Pyramid scheme, you can't win really unless you're in the top.
The only way to win is by screwing somebody else. That's the only way to win is by hurting someone, which is why I can't sell it.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. That's clear.
So
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about. So I do a little bit of coaching, mentoring. I've done copy chiefing, but this is what you really focus on, and obviously you're one of the best at it. So first of all, how did you? I think you do mostly coaching these days. Is that right?
I do mostly coaching and writing books and
So
content. Yep.
what was the transition from writing to teaching, and what kind of inspired you to do it that way?
Yeah, I started writing copy in the early 90s and I started having some pretty big wins, and started doing really well with it. towards the end of the decade. And at that point, I was in a screenwriting class. I'm still very interested in storytelling, and every now and then the teacher would say something, and I would say, "Well, from the tawdry world of copywriting, we use something very similar." And he'd get pissed off, but he'd listen to me and agree. Yes, I see what you're saying. One day after class, two girls came up to me and said, "David, what is this copywriting thing you're talking about?" And so I explained to them, and I said, "Would you teach it to us?" And these women were professional writers. One was a published novelist, one was a working journalist. I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you'll let me record it, I'll teach you." And things like that kept happening. That turned into my first info product, which did really well, but people kept asking me to teach them, and suddenly I realized they they were asking me for a reason, and it was because I'm like a compulsive explainer, and I like to help people. And I found and I had a coach myself that was totally different from any other experience I'd ever had. This was a little earlier. So I started to put the things together, and I just started offering people coaching, and they took me up, and then they started having really great success. And then about 2008, like a lot of successful people, I started to feel like a fraud. So I went back to school. I'm not sure this did any good, but it made me feel good. I got a master's in education, totally
Okay.
useless. And then I went to a PhD program, which had a module within the program on, they called it evidence-based coaching. And that was really good. And so I learned a lot of coaching skills. I argued with them like crazy because I'm sure, as sort of the typical executive or life coaching where someone says, "Well, he's trying to screw me." And your answer is, how do you feel about that? You know, it might work in helping people clear up things in their minds, but in terms of copywriting, well, first of all, there are a lot of things that are counterintuitive. Secondly, people have blind spots, and you can't just expect them to see through their own blind spots. So I fought with the people in there, but they appreciated me. I wasn't just there to be a troublemaker. I said, "No, I can't do it that way." And then, "Okay, David. Okay, David, sit down." You know. And so I kept doing it, and the business, I would speak about it. I would, I used to go to a lot of conferences and meet people, and I found a lot of people wanted coaching. You know, you can get to actually, I think people need coaching more in the middle and in the later parts of their career than they do in the beginning. I mean, maybe they need a good copy chief and a good system and good feedback. But that's sort of the Mr. Miyagi type of coach. It's not the kind of coach I am. I've never had anybody wax my car, uh, nor would I want anyone to have to wash it first.
Right.
So I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, my first coaching, the first mentors I should say I had were Mark Ford and then Jed Canty, and
Wow.
both were like it was learning by abuse in some ways, where just do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, and then the first copy review call I had with Jed Canty, 2010, I think this was. We were on the phone for over 12 hours on a Skype, just reviewing and writing copy on and
Wow.
on. Yeah, he had some really good ADHD meds back in those days. And that was for Newsmax, and that was a really successful sales letter. So I, it's worth it, but it's painful that way. I guess what are the types of coaching that you actually do? Like, who are the clients that you take on? Because I know you do copy critiques, but that's a little bit separate from coaching. So what are the range of things that you do with your clients?
Well, Chris Haddad was a client of mine before was Chris Haddad. I don't take credit for him being Chris Haddad, but I definitely helped him accelerate his path. Million Dollar Mike Morgan, that financial copywriter. I've had a lot of guys who've gone on great success. These days, I'm about 50% advanced freelance copywriters, people making a good six-figure income, and business owners. I mean, this may sound crazy. I have one business owner met with last week. He writes his little Facebook ads, and we did it's like 100 words, and he actually brought another copywriter on. We went over this ad, made about 5 or 6 really small changes, and he got 50% more revenue following week. And we spent an entire session trying all kinds of ideas, and all we're going to do is move one paragraph in front of another. But, when you're getting hundreds of impressions to the general public, to a cold audience, those things can make all the difference. So I have people like that. I have one guy that he was sort of a copywriting mentoring client 5 years ago, and then we finished a year and said goodbye. And then he said, well, I had this huge business, I sold it, but now I'm doing copywriting again. Would you like to? And so we basically do critiques. I mean, he's been through my stuff because I know about that kind of mentoring by torture. That's how I learned as a journalist, and it works, and it leaves a lot of scars. And maybe that's the reason I don't take beginners, because I don't want to put anyone through that. I think there are other ways, but yeah, I don't generally use a harsh approach. I mean, my first coach, Jim Camp, he was Vietnam vet, fighter pilot. He used to drop bombs on North Vietnam. I can't remember one time he yelled at me. I mean, he was a tough guy, but it's like he had a way of getting me to see things. It was different than anything I'd ever experienced. I think that had now, occasionally when all else fails, I may use a little sarcasm or yell at somebody once or twice, but not much.
Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like, especially Jed was, or Mark wasn't either, yelling at me all the time. But it was entirely, I was disregarded. The only thing was the copy. And if they didn't like the copy, they would just say they didn't like the copy. So it felt, when you're a newer writer, it feels like a personal attack when your words are
Well,
shredded apart.
you're not being acknowledged. You're putting all of yourself into this copy, and it's like this part of yourself doesn't exist. No, I try and work with them on that. I will ask them why they did it. I will talk to them about why it doesn't work, or ask them, or even try and take them through a reader's logical thought process or emotional response for it, which is my style. And, obviously whatever they did for you worked pretty well. May not have been that pleasant though.
I was 22 when I started. It was probably what I needed to get the discipline. You can't go back and change it, and I don't regret it. And I still consider them both good friends. So it's,
Oh yeah,
I don't mind.
yeah. And everyone's got their own style. And I wasn't treated with kid gloves when I was 22 either. And I don't know, is that how 22-year-olds need to be treated? I don't know. What would happen if you did to a 22-year-old these days? They probably file a report with HR or something. I don't know.
I think I needed it because my ego was so big back then. It was unreasonably big. So I probably needed to be brought back down. It's still unreasonably big. So I still probably need to be brought back down. What type of clients so if somebody's listening to this and they want to get a little coaching, they can go to garfinkelcoaching.com, right? That's the best place to go. And they should have a little bit of experience already in the copywriting or business world.
Right. If they're a copywriter, they need to be a working copywriter, and they need to be making decent money, and they need to want to be making considerably more money. If they're a business owner, they don't have to be a great copywriter, but they need to be, in our world. They need to see things. They need to think that advertising's purpose is to generate leads or to create sales, not to get your name better known or to get share of mind or whatever.
We're looking for a direct ROI here.
Yeah. So, I mean, they might want me to work with their team. I like it when I can work with them one-on-one, the best, and of course they're, because a business owner, even if mean, writing copy can take a lot of time, no matter how fast you get. And so a business owner may not eventually want to be the copywriter for their business, but if they know how to evaluate copy, that'll help manage people or get a lot more out of the people they hire as contractors.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So garfinkelcoaching.com. And definitely, even if you're not a copywriter or business owner and you just want to be more interesting, go pick up the Persuasion story code. You're going to learn a lot of interesting, good frameworks that you can quickly put together little stories that'll make you more persuasive and more interesting. So definitely pick that up. So David, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, you're welcome. Henry, it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. All right, everybody. Until next time, stay free.